Stories with unheroic protagonists are nothing new. Empathizing with a bad guy makes their journey all the more compelling. It's good storytelling. But in some cases, people end up over-sympathizing with the character and convince themselves that this is the true hero, and anyone who gets in their way is the real problem. Gomorrah has been advertised as Italy's answer to Breaking Bad, but anyone going into it hoping for an Italian Walter White is going to be disappointed. From the first episode, Gomorrah establishes a violent, bleak, and hopeless atmosphere. There's no absurdist humor to lighten the tension. From beginning to end, you are engulfed in the dark, visceral world of crime-infested Naples. At a passing glance, it might feel cynical and lazy. In the first episode alone, we see a man and his mother victimized by arson, a grenade thrown into a coffee shop in broad daylight, and an armed raid on a drug lord's compound. It feels over the top, ridiculous even, like the writers are trying to draw us in with extreme violence. And while many scenes in between the action hint at the deeper purpose of the show, it's the final moment of the episode that convinced me to stick with it. After all the misery we've witnessed in the last hour, the final moments show us some random kids playing lookout. One boy tries to reach the base, while another keeps watch and warns the others before he gets too close. This short, simple scene puts everything into a new context. The insane carnage we've seen wasn't over the top at all. For this city, for these people, this is normal. This is the future these children expect. And what makes it all the more grossly compelling is that while Gomorrah is a fictitious story, its inspiration is firmly rooted in the grim reality that is life under the Gomorrah. The Gomorrah is not the Mafia you usually see on TV. Most gangster stereotypes are based on the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. For an American, Mafia might conjure up the image of a monolithic criminal empire bound by ritual and tradition. The Gomorrah is something far more terrifying, a competing group of loosely affiliated business interests. It is a massive organization, ratioing 5 Camorristi for every 1 Sicilian mafioso. However, it does not operate as one large body. Gomorrah is a non-existent word among members. They refer to it only as the system, because that's what it is, a mechanism to operate the economy. Where the typical mafia is organized like a pyramid, the Gomorrah have a horizontal structure where numerous clans compete with each other. There is a governing body of allied clans called the Directory that manages and coordinates things on a large scale, but for the most part, clans operate autonomously. This leads to a lot of infighting, but it also makes the structure as a whole more resilient. You can't end the system by killing the boss. Operations will continue regardless of leadership changes. The ruin of a powerful clan is not the end of the problem, it's the beginning, as it leaves a vacuum that the other clans will fight over. And so, people living in Gomorrah-infested neighborhoods are often caught up in their wars. The Gomorrah's presence can be so dominating that it operates like a micro-government ruling over the neighborhood. It's not unusual for them to place their own people as the mayor in their preferred cities. Nowhere is this more true than Naples, which serves as their primary place of operation. Because of the Gomorrah's influence and the government's reluctance to draw attention to organized crime, the extent of their power isn't often talked about publicly. This is part of what makes Gomorrah something of a revolution. The show's origins stem from a 2006 nonfiction book written by Roberto Saviano. Saviano is a born and raised Neapolitan who grew up in Gomorrah-ruled territory. His book is an in-depth investigation into how they operate and provides an unsettling look at the scope of their power. The book was a bestseller and has been translated in 51 countries. It brought a lot of unwanted attention to the Gomorrah, and to this day, Saviano has to have a government escort while in Italy because there is a standing order for his murder. However, as popular as the book was, the show has brought it to the next level. Having been sold in over 190 countries, it has brought attention to the Gomorrah on a worldwide scale. It's an up-close look at a colossal criminal organization that has lurked in the shadows for over 100 years. Gomorrah doesn't have a central protagonist. It's a bit like The Wire in that the setting and the power structures could be considered the main character. That's not to say there are no mainstays or character arcs. Much of the series' drama is driven by a few key people. First up is Chiro the Immortal, one of the two mascot characters. Chiro is an orphan who joined the system at a young age, so he has an intimate understanding of how it operates. He has a talent for surviving suicide missions and has been called the ultimate soldier. Not a totally unfair label, he basically turns into Solid Snake by the end of the series. However, Chiro dislikes this reputation as his bosses see it as good reason to keep him on the ground and out of leadership. But Chiro wants a position of influence. He's tired of risking his life for his boss's whims and wants a more stable regime focused on profit rather than power. An expert at understanding people's core motivations, he's very good at forming alliances. This is his most dangerous weapon, as he is an ends justify the means kind of guy. No one who trusts him is ever safe.
Tu sai che Ciro di Marzio non potete fidare. Questa usana può mettere un po' che burdarlo in mezzo clan nostro. Ma rimane a tutte e tre o quattro, va piglia e vietto con meno preservativo usato.
Chiro works for Don Pietro Savastano, the reigning king of the Second Dogliano neighborhood for the past 30 years. Pietro is the worst combination of ruthless and egotistical. He always has to have the biggest stick in the room. Even in his lowest moments, he manages to exert authority. By his side is his wife Lady Emma, a fierce woman dedicated to maintaining Savastano rule. Protecting the clan and protecting her family are one and the same to her, which leads to some very twisted decisions in raising her son, Gennaro. Jenny is the show's secondary mascot. He's a sensitive kid haunted by his father's shadow. He starts the series as a spoiled, naive punk, but as time goes on, we watch him transform into his father's successor. A few other noteworthy characters include Salvatore Conte, the devout and stylish rival boss to the Savastano clan, Patrizia, who works as a messenger for the clans, and Enzo Blueblood, the grandson of a famous Camarista. Gomorrah does not judge or analyze these characters, it simply portrays the reality of the world they live in. You will quickly realize that any characters you want to like cannot be redeemed. They will consistently make the worst, most evil choice possible. After a while, you stop holding out hope that they'll do something merciful or heroic. Instead, you wait with the expectation that whatever bad outcome could happen, will happen. Displays of conscience or remorse are rare, typically only seen in people who are new to the system. It shows us how rapidly you have to normalize the violence in this life. Gomorrah violence is constant, and anyone haunted by the ghosts of their victims won't last very long.
Tu non devi essere paura. Hai capito? Tu sei scesa in da macchina. Perché volevo fare una pizza. Volevo lasciare una che di merda in terra che ha firmato mia. Hai capito? Oh. Non devi essere paura.
To understand what makes the Gomorrah an appealing career choice, you have to grow familiar with the world they live in. Many of the show's gangsters are designed to look cool. They dress stylishly, the bosses are powerful and intimidating, only showing vulnerability in rare moments that are still acceptable in traditional masculinity. Their homes are gaudy displays of wealth, a stark contrast to the rundown neighborhoods outside. These characters make a very conscious effort to distinguish themselves from their environment. The Gomorrah infest neighborhoods plagued by poverty and addiction, places where law enforcement has little to no control, and the clans can establish their own rule. Many clan initiates are kids who grow up hearing legends about Camorristi who outwit the police, take down rival gangs, and become kingpins. It's dangerous, bloody work, but it's a chance to get out and become somebody. A chance to change your class.
Grazie, Don Pietro. Se vede che queste è roba che costa assai.
Pascalino, e chi ne sono i soldi che fanno l'uomo onesto?
But rising to the top comes with a price. Through these characters, we see how the system spreads like a cancer to everyone in their lives. Camarista do not set limits when they want to make a point. Wives, girlfriends, siblings, children, grandparents, anyone with even a tangential connection to a mark is a potential target. Main characters are typically introduced with loved ones and a large posse of friends, all of which dwindle away over time. Secondary characters are hard to notice at first, introduced as just another face in the crowd, but as time goes on and the numbers thin out, you grow more familiar with them simply because they've managed to survive this long. Even the likability of these characters is the result of a numbing effect. Everyone does something unforgivable. Attachment for any one character comes simply from rooting for a different kind of evil. There is no chance for a happy ending. That's what it's like to live in the system. Even if you're not a member, its presence consumes your community, making death and suspicion a constant in your life. It's an endless grind that wears down all hope.
Esta música misma.
It's worth talking about what makes Gomorrah watchable. This is bleak subject matter, and it's hard to slog through 5 seasons of misery and violence. Many stories overcome this challenge by keeping us invested in the main character's journey. We're left wondering how this will turn out for them. Will they face grim tragedy for their actions, or will they learn a lesson and grow into someone better? But Gomorrah can't afford to keep us too invested in any one character. As Saviano writes in his book, here there is not a minute in which the business of living does not seem like a life sentence, a penalty that must be paid for by a wild, fast, and fierce existence. Gomorrah captures this by maintaining distance between us and the cast. You never feel like this is one person's story. We have to believe that any one of these characters could be killed at any time. Our perspective is like a fly buzzing through the city watching events unfold. That means no flashbacks or glimpses into someone's imagination. We are firmly grounded in reality. But despite our distanced perspective, the emotional highs and lows of these characters hit hard. The cast deserves a lot of credit here. Gomorrah isn't a dialogue-heavy show. Emotion is primarily conveyed through face and body language, and some of these performances are nothing short of incredible. For instance, as a boss, Jenny works hard to maintain his composure, but these facial twitches give us a glimpse at what's going on under the surface. This scene where Chiro runs into the ocean is the terrifying catharsis of a man who has survived so many situations where no one expected him to come back. I think back to this scene whenever Chiro commits some of his worst crimes. This feels like the moment where any remaining shred of conscience was lost, and the street kid who's been treated as expendable his entire life decides he'll do whatever it takes to beat everyone who used him. The power structures, friendships, and allegiances in Gomorrah change so much that the story as a whole keeps you invested. You want to see how things turn out in this city, even if you're not rooting for any of the characters in it. Several one-off episodes take us away from the main cast and focus on a minor character. These are so perfectly timed in the narrative that they don't feel like distractions. Each one progresses the main story while fleshing out perspectives of background characters. The show's fly-on-the-wall storytelling is strong enough that even the short time we spend with them is enough to make us care. What really ties everything together is Gomorrah's atmosphere. The cinematography immerses you in the setting. Expansive establishing shots of the city make characters seem small, driving home how nothing is really under their control no matter how much power they obtain. The soundtrack by Mokadelic is perfectly utilized to build on the mood of each scene. The music blends high-stakes tension with tragic melancholy that keeps you on the edge between feeling terrified and breaking into tears. Some of the weightier tracks kick in before anything big happens on screen, building your anticipation as you realize a hammer is about to drop. Gomorrah found the perfect balance to keep the story entertaining without sacrificing its message. Yes, it's miserable and sometimes difficult to watch, but there's always enough going on that you want to see what happens next, even if you know it won't be anything good. There are a lot of ways for someone to become a camerista. Kids often get in by doing errands for the right people. It starts with little things like delivering messages or warning dealers when cops are coming. The kids who prove themselves might get bigger tasks with more risks, and things quickly escalate from there. In Jenny's case, things went differently. Being Pietro's son afforded him many privileges, and he wasn't as familiar with the Gomorrah's carnage the way someone like Ciro was. When he says he wants to get more involved in the business, it's clear that he is way out of his depth. Violence in Gomorrah is not given the Hollywood treatment. It hits viscerally and objectively. It's difficult to watch, but like the people inflicting it, you are given no room to think about it. Jenny's initiation into Gomorrah violence is thrust on him unexpectedly. His victim did nothing wrong, and there's nothing to gain from killing them. They were chosen simply so he could get it over with. It's presented like a rite of passage. Everyone has to come out of the other side of this thing before they can really get involved in the system.
Come a nascere. Nessuno l'ha mai chiesto. Voleva fare.
Once they take that plunge, you can see a shift in the character's actions. Murder becomes just another option to solve problems. It's not even worth thinking about. What makes Jenny one of the show's most terrifying characters is that no matter how far he sinks into the lifestyle, you can still see the scared kid in there, struggling to survive in a world he was not prepared for.
Brutta cosa, paura, eh? Se una sei gestita diventa pericolosa, ti fa perdere lucidità. C'è una certa abitudine per gestire paura.
Fear drives so many of Gomorrah's characters. Once you've seen how the Gomorrah processes murder, the fragility of your own life becomes crystal clear. You could be killed at any time by anyone for any reason. No friendship, influence, or alliance will protect you. This is life on the edge, a constant state of danger and stress with no relief. Once you've realized what you've gotten yourself into, another horrifying reality sinks in. Everyone around you lives the same way. There's no telling what these people are capable of. Pascal Barra, the animal, became famous for murdering Francis Turratello in prison by ripping his heart out with his bare hands and then biting into it. And if you're wondering, yes, there is a character lightly inspired by this guy in the show. But don't expect to see any gruesome heart-eating. Gomorrah shows us a different kind of cannibalism. The system operates on a free market. Today's allies are tomorrow's competition. If someone offers you a helping hand, there's undoubtedly something in it for them, and you'd best figure out what it is before they eat you alive. Allegiances in Gomorrah shift often. Nothing ever feels safe because the inevitability of conflict always hangs in the air. Anyone who thinks they can outsmart their way out of danger fails to understand the reality of the system. This lifestyle of fear isn't limited to the Camorristi. Everyone living in their territory feels it to some extent. At one point in the show, Pietro receives a commemorative mural. Street art is a hot topic in Naples right now. Murals of young, murdered Camorristi have sparked debates about glorifying crime. Meanwhile, other groups are trying to inspire hope in the community, with uplifting murals representing the power of education and aspiration. One of these is even featured in Gomorrah's final season. However, I doubt Pietro's mural is intended as a direct commentary on that conflict. Rather, it's likely an effort to drive home just how much influence the Gomorrah has on the people. Pietro ruled over his neighborhood for 30 years, which is no small feat. During that time, there was violence and conflict like always, but also something else, a sense of stability. He managed to keep competing clans out of Secondagliano and maintain rule with an iron fist. His name was synonymous with the neighborhood. If you had a problem, this was the man to go to. Don't mistake this as a positive portrayal. It's surreally horrifying. This is a land that has abandoned all hope of something better and bent to the rule of a tyrant. Pietro's reign was the established order, something that many people came to accept, while others were too afraid to speak against it. In this place of fear and chaos, the people's oppressor became a twisted savior, the preferred alternative to more capricious and unproven gangsters eager to seize power. Gomorrah is a tragic commentary on the Mafia's influence, but there's another unspoken target of its criticisms. Things like this don't happen in a vacuum. While there's plenty of blame to be had for the people inflicting this violence, what kind of systems allow something like this to happen in the first place?
Vedi la sua luce qua giù, apri il tuo cuore al suo amore.
Architecture plays a major role in Gomorrah's atmosphere. We're often treated to wide, establishing shots of neighborhoods, dizzying views down dimly lit staircases, and ant farm-like glimpses into drug dens. It's impossible to watch the show and not notice Vele de Scampia, towering residential complexes that resemble wind sails. They were built to replace the slums of Naples and encourage community building. Living spaces were intentionally made small, with the idea that people would spend more time outside in the shared spaces. But the project was plagued with problems. The planned common spaces were cancelled, blocks were built much closer together than intended, creating cramped quarters that blocked out natural light. Much of the intended funds were quietly seized by corrupt private interests. People were moved in before the project was properly finished, they couldn't access basic utilities like gas or electricity, and dangerous hazards like open elevator shafts were left all over the place. It was a dirty, dangerous mess that one Gomorrah boss realized would make a perfect spot for drug dealing. Due to the labyrinthian design of the sails, criminals familiar with the landscape could set up discreet dealing spots and easily escape police raids. La Vele became one of the world's largest drug dens, nestled amidst innocent people trying to live honest lives. The separation between criminal and civilian blurred. Gomorrah operations became a regular sight for residents, making it easier for the clans to find customers and recruits. This twisted relationship is captured in Gomorrah's visual storytelling. Civilians in the show are, for the most part, passive. The Camorristi walk through their halls, set up lookouts in their homes, build hideouts in their walls, all without protest or concern. The Gomorrah's presence is unsettlingly normal, a fact of daily life. Gomorrah gives us a glimpse at how easy it is to start working for the system. It often begins innocently with simple jobs like delivering packages or driving trucks. For some people, that's where it ends. They have no interest in joining the clan. These small jobs are the easiest way to make decent money. But for the reasons we talked about earlier, others see this as the best opportunity they'll ever get. And soon enough, these simple errands escalate into something more dangerous. One of the most disturbing consequences of the Gomorrah melding with civilian life is that it destroys any pretense of innocence. In system-ruled territory, there's no such thing as integrity. The Gomorrah's presence is so prevalent that everyone is considered a potential affiliate. Being murdered only makes you look more suspicious. People unfamiliar with Gomorrah power dynamics often think that killing an innocent person is a naive gesture on the part of the clans, because it only legitimizes and amplifies the victim's examples and words. A confirmation of the truths he spoke. Wrong. That's never the way it is. As soon as you die in the land of the Gomorrah, you're enshrouded in countless suspicions, and innocence is a distant hypothesis, the last one imaginable. You are guilty until proven innocent.
Il problema è che quando i buci fanno amore con la paura diventano voce popolo. E voce popolo, voce Dio.
Gomorrah has been criticized for glamorizing crime. The mayor of Naples claimed that violent crime skyrocketed every time a new episode aired. Members of Italy's anti-mafia administration have said that it humanizes gangsters and makes them seem likable, which is dangerous. I can see why these complaints might land with some people. While the show is vehemently anti-Gomorrah, the mainstay characters do take on an almost mythic aura. It's not unusual for criminals to cite Tony Montana or Michael Corleone as their idols, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ciro and Jenny have fans among aspiring Camorristi. But no matter how far the show strays into glamorization at times, it always swings back to the original message, hitting you like a truck with the reminder that there's nothing fantastical about this life. Saviano isn't ignorant of the influence the media has on criminals. He has an entire chapter of his book dedicated to it. It's his belief that stories that focus on the lives of criminals serve as a defense against organized crime. When these facts of mafia life are kept secret, if they remain within courtrooms and prison cells, reported only in the local press or crime columns, the bloodshed will have achieved its aim. But when the story is told, it's as if a short circuit occurs. A story can overcome the rule of silence and help us understand the dynamics of the organization and its members. All it takes is a book, a television program, a film to shed light on just one aspect. This is all it takes to trigger a revolution. It's worth mentioning that the criticisms I mentioned earlier are seemingly well-meaning sentiments from politicians who actively work against organized crime. However, some complaints have a more biased approach. Italy's former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi complained that the journalists who refuse to portray a positive image of Italy are merchants of doom. Another former Prime Minister said that if he found the people who were giving Italy a bad name in the world by writing about the Mafia, he would throttle them. Gosh, I wonder why he took it so personally. Nationalist propaganda like this is why Saviano and other creatives get labeled as crime profiteers. Traitors who make their fortune by dragging their own country through the mud. On the surface, the novel Gomorrah looks like every writer's dream, a publishing debut that received worldwide acclaim. Saviano was only 26 when it came out, and it made him an established industry name, but he does not look at it with much fondness. Since the book's release, he can't go out in public without a police escort. The foreword to Gomorrah's 10th anniversary edition gives us a glimpse at the mental toll he has suffered after more than a decade living with a price on his head. I have no faith in institutions of any kind. I've been very unhappy to become a kind of symbol in these years because I only recognize myself in describing what's real. I don't think I believe in a political solution, not out of lack of interest, but from caring too much. Democracy has built within itself a highly dangerous equivalence between aspects that ought to be in conflict, and continuing to focus on the abyss of the criminal world allows me to understand how legal and illegal economies have the same DNA, the same life, the same objective, just an imperceptible difference in the practical methods. It takes work and radical change to cut off the Mafia's influence, the kind of change that would also hurt the people who already have power because they're all benefiting from the same structures. The old mobster refrain,
"There's no mafia,"
sounds very similar to the critics who downplay crime so that they can maintain a glorious image of Italy. So yes, Gomorrah does humanize these malignant, merciless killers. It humanizes without excusing or forgiving. We watch them turn into monsters. We understand why they do the things they do. They have a choice, and they are responsible, but we have to consider what created them. This sentiment is expressed in an iconic scene where a priest speaks at the funeral of a 15-year-old boy, a boy who, days before he died, killed a man to gain a foothold in the system.
Tutti sappiamo che oggi non è morto un eroe. Ma per quante responsabilità possa davvero avere Daniele, restano i suoi 16 anni. I figli delle famiglie che nascono in altri luoghi d'Italia hanno opportunità che qui sono state negate. Qui non ci sono colori. Qui tutto è grigio. Qui non ci sono luoghi dove far sviluppare nel bene i talenti dei nostri figli. Questo è un quartiere dormitorio. Qui vogliono che la gente resti tappata in casa, non deve uscire, non deve intromettersi. Hanno voluto un'intera zona ad esclusivo uso dello spazio a cielo aperto. Il Padre Eterno terrà conto del fatto che se Daniele ha commesso degli errori, sono stati errori commessi da un ragazzo di 16 anni. Un ragazzo che certamente era responsabile di quello che stava facendo. Ma 16 anni? 16 anni sono così pochi che ti costringono a guardare meglio cosa c'è dietro. Che ti obbligano a distribuire le responsabilità. Quella di Daniele è un'età che bussa alla coscienza di chi ciancia. Di legalità, di impegno, di lavoro. E non bussa con le nocche, ma bussa con le unghie. In piedi.
In 2016, it was announced that Vele de Scampia would be torn down. Demolition began in 2020, and only a couple of buildings remained standing when Gomorrah filmed its final season. A very fitting coincidence for the series' end. The destruction has been publicized as a victory, a major blow against crime, but as Saviano and several other Neapolitans have pointed out, this doesn't solve anything. Politicians talk about the beginning of a new era, but there are no plans to make it a reality. The Gomorrah didn't depend on the sales to survive, it was just one of the many nests they infested. The government ignored this place for decades, felt the heat when it became a publicized problem that was too big to ignore, and then found a nice way to spin a victory for themselves without really doing anything. We destroyed an affordable housing complex. Pop the champagne, everyone! I understand why some might overlook Gomorrah as just another crime drama in an era where anti-heroes reign supreme. But there is an authenticity to this series that you'll be hard-pressed to find elsewhere. It's all filmed on location, several characters have living counterparts, and many of the story beats are based on real-life events. The show plays up its drama because they understand how to invest people in the story. Much of it is aggrandized, but that's so that it can do what it needs to do. get people invested. Criminal empires thrive in the shadows. They don't want to be the subject of popular TV shows. When Gomorrah becomes a known word around the world, when people see the impact it has, something starts to shift. Even if the Mafia can suppress the voices of the people in their own communities, they can't stop the outside world from looking in. You can't sell a portrait of a prosperous country when all the artists are painting a different picture. Gomorrah is a tragedy because tragedies remind us that things don't have to be this way. We can't waste time blaming an individual. Organized crime is a systemic problem that requires systemic solutions. And the only way to get people invested in those solutions is to scream and shout. Make sure everyone knows what's going on. Because the voice of the people is the voice of God. It's the voice that makes things happen. The voice that demands justice. And it can be a powerful ally or a terrible enemy, depending on what stories it's been told.